I've got to remember to turn my phone off during the show. Last week it was going off in my pocket, and it sounded like I had just shoplifted a bunch of vibrators. Anyway, let's do this. It's the Paperback Warrior Podcast.
Welcome to the 87th episode of the Paperback Warrior Podcast. We're happy to be here, and happy you're here too. This show and our blog at paperbackwarrior.com discusses mid-20th century fiction in the spy, crime noir, action, and adventure genres, along with a sprinkling of horror, science fiction, and some other genres from time to time. You can also visit us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and email us at paperbackwarrior@yahoo.com. I'm going to throw it over to my broadcast partner, Tom, to tell us what's happening today.
All right, thank you, Eric. Today, you, Eric, are going to be presenting a feature on the life and literary work of A.S. Fleischman. Is that how we're pronouncing it, Fleischman?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, we'll stick with that. He was a mid-20th century crime noir author who dabbled in magic shows and children's literature. He was also one of the Fawcett Gold Medal regulars back in the day, and I'm sure Eric has some very exciting stuff to talk about. Eric will also be reviewing a book called Wild Country. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Good. And now that was the first book in the 1990s Mountain Man series called Mountain Majesty. I'm going to be reviewing The Long Tattoo by Eric Corder. But first, reprints, trips, and acquisitions. You ready for that?
Yes.
So I've been hitting the road lately, Eric, and there's also some noteworthy reprints I want to talk about. But first, I think we need to discuss the elephant in the room.
Are you saying I've gained weight?
No, dummy. I'm talking about Mr. Cables.
You want to talk about that here?
It does break from our normal format, but I'm certain that our listeners will dig this also. And I feel kind of weird not sharing this with them. It's okay if I proceed. You're the boss. I'm requesting permission to proceed.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, you and I normally talk about this stuff, before the show even starts about this kind of stuff. But yeah, why not?
We need to discuss this, and I've been so excited to talk about it. So the other day, listener, Eric sent me a text message recommending an 82-page horror novel called Mr. Cables by an author named Ronald Malfi. That's M-A-L-F-I. Write that down. Now, the book itself was published in November 2020, so I apologize, listener, because I know you're about vintage paperbacks, for this short diversion into the world of contemporary horror on our Vintage Paperback podcast. Now, Eric, before I tell the listener about this book, how on earth did you even get turned on to this?
I really like Ronald Malfi's books. I've been reading him for a long time. Like you said, he's a contemporary horror author, and I think he's from Maryland. And, man, the guy's just so talented. I want to say, Tom, that he won a Bram Stoker Award, or maybe he was a finalist for his horror novel, The Floating Staircase, which is really, really good. But he's put out a lot of great books, and if you like horror, then this is your guy. And like I said, I've read most of his books, and I finally got around to reading this one just because it was a short novella. For whatever reason, I just kind of put it off, just expecting him to put out a full-length novel. But yeah.
Is your impression that Mr. Malfi is a big deal in the current horror world? Like, if I was like really hip deep in like horror fiction, if I knew as much about that as I know about other stuff, would I know him? Is he at Stephen? He's not at Stephen King level. No. Is he at like Richard Lehman level? Or?
Were you reading horror in the 90s when Brian Keene started coming up and about?
Yeah, I read a zombie novel.
Yeah, The Rising, and they started gaining a little bit of ground traction. Right. I think Ronald Malfi's there. He's probably got like maybe a dozen books, horror novels.
All right, so that's good. So let me give a quick plot synopsis of this book without spoiling too much. So the story is narrated by a successful horror author named Wilson. He's probably at like Richard Lehman level of fame, probably much at like Malfi's level of fame now. Not quite a Stephen King. So he's at a bookstore signing, and a fan asks him to sign a 1999 hardcover called Mr. Cables, written by Wilson. The problem? Wilson never wrote that book. So he trades this mysterious hardcover for a copy of his new novel, and he brings the book home. It's published by an unknown imprint who places Wilson's photo on the author page with a mostly accurate biography. Now, the central mystery of this novel is, why would anyone go to this much trouble to create a counterfeit book? Now, things start getting really scary once the reader begins to understand the content of the book itself, and I'm not going to spoil that for you here. Now, there's some late book revelations that shed really satisfying light on what exactly is happening here. And Malfi, the author, the real author, explores ideas of kind of where authors really get their ideas and inspiration from. I enjoyed Mr. Cables quite a bit, and I found sections to be genuinely unnerving. I can recommend this book to contemporary horror fans without reservation. This was my first experience with Malfi's writing, but it's not going to be my last. I want to read more by this guy. Eric, what are your thoughts on the book?
I really liked it a lot. That was Malfi at his peak. It's just a short one-sitting read. I mean, it's quick, and his prose just flows really well. And I'm not going to ruin it for anyone, but for some reason, Tom, I kept thinking of John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness for some reason. I'm not sure where I'm getting that from, but it kept making me think of that. But if you like this one, Tom, you should also check out Skullbelly. It's a little shorter. It's probably like 40 pages.
Is that by him also?
Yeah, it scared the crap out of me.
Really? Okay. Well, yeah, sold. In fact, I'm going to write that down myself. All right, cool. So the book again, and again, I apologize if you only want to hear about vintage paperbacks and we're wasting your time here, but if you dig contemporary horror, Mr. Cables by Ronald Malfi, Malfi. It's available on Kindle and paperback and stuff.
And I will say, on Amazon right now, he's got pre-orders for his brand new horror novel, which I think is coming out in July. I can't think of the name of it, but you can Google him.
Good. We'll hope we get to make him rich. All right, so back to the land of vintage paperbacks. Eric, have you read the Lone Wolf series by Mike Berry?
You know, I'm glad you brought that up because I see those books everywhere, and I don't really know if it's a vigilante series or if he's like a commando guy. I can't make heads or tails of it. I've never bought one.
Okay, so the Lone Wolf series was a serial vigilante series. It ran for 14 books from 1973 to 1975. It was one of those titles that would not have existed but for the success of the Executioner series by Don Pendleton. Anyway, the Lone Wolf series is really highly regarded among men's adventure paperback fans. I am embarrassed to say that I have not read them either.
Yeah, I haven't read any of them, and like I said, I see them everywhere. In fact, I was at Chamberlain's yesterday, and I didn't buy it, but I saw it.
Okay, cool. So the Lone Wolf series by Mike Berry, it's available today as ebooks from Prologue Press. They're actually even free if you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, so I may actually check them out. The reason I bring it up is because Mike Berry was really an author named Barry Malzberg. Malzberg, we'll say, who I've always associated with being a science fiction author. Like a lot of writers, he wrote some sleaze books at the beginning of his career, and Starkhouse has been reprinting a lot of those sleaze books as doubles in trade paperback form. So if you go to starkhousepress.com and click on crime books and then Barry Malzberg's name, you can see basically the entire selection of his early works as reprints. So the latest one comes out on April 26, and it's called Fire Machine. And it's actually two books, one called Fire and one called Machine. In fact, let me hand this over to you. Take a look at that. Fire was originally released in 1968 under the pseudonym Mel Johnson, and the title then was Instant Sex. And Machine was originally titled Do It To Me, also by Mel Johnson. So
wow.
Fire and Machine became the reprints that are under now. So if you type in Fire Machine and Barry Malzberg, you'll find it. Anyway, I hate to do this because we actually have a very good relationship with Starkhouse, and I don't want to burn that bridge. But I also need to be honest with the listener. I read the first half of Fire, and I had to set it down.
So hang on a sec. I might be just a little confused. I'm not following you. This Fire Machine book is the Lone Wolf.
No, has nothing to do with Lone Wolf. Same author.
Okay.
I'm segueing into why Barry Malzberg should matter to our listeners, because we get a lot of fans who are men's adventure fans, and a lot of fans who think the Lone Wolf series is great, and a lot of people out there have a lot of respect for Barry Malzberg, as do I. Okay, but back when he was long before he was a name for himself, he was writing sleaze novels under pseudonyms. Starkhouse is reprinting those sleaze novels. One's called Fire, one's called Machine. They had different titles back in the day. I read Fire, not good.
Not good. So it's really that bad, huh?
Now, I mean, it wasn't terrible. It just wasn't going anywhere for me. Maybe the second half of the book's brilliant, so take this quasi-review with a mountain of salt. So the book opens with this guy, young. His name's Coleman. He's a young guy. He's serving in the U.S. Army in Vietnam. He's in a communications unit relaying classified and coded orders from military command to combat troops. He's not seeing much action in Nam, and his girlfriend back home has turned cold in her letters, so he's looking to get laid while he's in Vietnam. This leads to a pretty comedic encounter with a Vietnamese prostitute that ends up leading to his return back home. Now, he's trying to restart life with his girl when he gets home, and it's an impossible task. So the Coleman hops in a Cadillac and hits the road, working his way across America toward New York City. Upon arrival in Manhattan, he lands a job in the stockroom of a sex toy and novelties company while occupying his free time trying to get laid. The novel's theme is that for a young man in his 20s, sex is everything and everywhere. The problem is that this Coleman character, the main character of the book, seems to be suffering from what today we would refer to as PTSD, and that's manifesting itself because he can't get it up, Eric. Now, by the time I sat the book down, the plot, as much as there is a plot, is Coleman trying to get laid and then suffering erectile dysfunction without being able to consummate the sex act. I got to say, from what I read, and I didn't finish it, so I didn't review it for the site, Malmsberg's a very good writer, but he gravitates toward very long paragraphs in this early career effort. The plot, however, just kind of failed to hold my interest. Your mileage, listener, may vary. I want to plug it because I like Stark House, but I also have to be honest with you that I wasn't crazy about it. The book is Fire Machine by Barry Malmsberg. It's out next week from Stark House, and if you don't know, now you know.
So I'm looking at one page in here. It's in a complete paragraph on one whole page.
He writes incredibly long paragraphs. He's a good writer, but it's just I'm not used to that. And so, all right, so that's that. I hope the Stark House isn't mad that I didn't love it. In other news, I took my show on the road recently, Eric, and I have some thoughts and acquisitions to share.
Oh, good. Where did you go?
I was dispatched to the tiny town of Fort White, Florida. Now, you've been around. Have you heard of Fort White, Florida?
No, I've never heard of that. Is it central or on the West Coast?
It's about 2 hours from here, and we're in Jacksonville. I would say it's near Gainesville, home of University of Florida, but it's actually 45 minutes from Gainesville. It's in Columbia County, Florida. Fort White is named after a military fort built in the 1830s during the Second Seminole War. It's home of the Ichetuckney River. You ever heard of that?
No.
It's one of those rivers that you can go to and like put a tube in and then go down the river, and there's all these tubing companies and like have a tube for your cooler full of beer.
Oh, yeah.
And then like you and a bunch of like filthy college kids will just like drink beer the whole time as you float down the river.
Maybe I have been there.
And get eaten by mosquitoes.
Yeah.
The town of Fort White has a population of 600. At its peak, it had a population of 2,000 people, mostly cotton and orange farmers, and with a now depleted phosphate mine. Boll weevils have decimated the cotton crops, so that industry's all gone away as well. Anyway, arriving in Fort White and then driving among the dilapidated trailers, I had a revelation, Eric. My eyes were finally open to a fact that you and I need to live with.
You're going to run for mayor.
No.
Oh.
This is a town that needs missionaries from Somalia to teach them how to floss.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Oh, man.
Just like your hometown. My revelation is that used bookstores are dying and won't be coming back, yet the vintage paperbacks owned by mostly old men will need to go somewhere when those old men die. My hope is that these books don't wind up in a landfill. Now, most towns in America probably don't have a functioning used bookstore for 100 miles. So I am hereby declaring that I believe, Eric, that thrift shops are the place to get used books now and in the future. I'm going to start stopping at the thrift stores the way I would normally stop at used bookstores as I travel through America. There are a lot more thrift stores than bookstores remaining, and their book prices are usually awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I agree for the most part. I stop in at the Goodwill stores, and I don't have a lot of success, and I keep going back, and I'm not sure why. And you know me and antique stores and my hatred for them. So, yeah, thrift stores are okay in my book.
Yeah, and I think you do better with a small-town independent thrift store than you do with the Goodwill stores here in Jacksonville that we have every quarter mile. I just think it's just a consolidation thing.
So did you have a good shopping experience there?
Yeah, it was pretty great. At least it was before I cleared them out. The place that I went to was called the Fort White Community Thrift Shop, and I get the feeling that it was some kind of nonprofit. Business-wise, it made absolutely no sense because they had a substantial wall of used paperback books that were 10 cents per book. I wasn't there to be their business consultant and explain them that there's an opportunity cost of shelf space, so instead I just bought a bunch of books.
What'd you get?
Okay, so I'll give you two highlights. Here in my hands is a Western paperback from 1952 called West of Quarantine by an author named Todd Hunter Ballard. You familiar with him?
Yes, I've got some of his Westerns.
Okay, good. Many may recognize him as W.T. Ballard, whose real name was Willis Todd Hunter Ballard. He was a very big deal in the pulp magazine era and one of the most famous and influential crime fiction authors who wrote for Black Mask magazine. During the paperback era, he wrote a lot of Westerns like this one, West of Quarantine. He also wrote a series of mysteries under the name Neil McNeil, starring private detectives Tony Constane and Burt McCall for Gold Medal, and I have a couple of those. Do you have any of the Neil McNeil books?
I'm not sure. I've got something that's Ballard, and it's something Vegas, leaving Vegas, or
maybe. But these,
yeah.
I don't think these were ever published under Ballard's own name.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to read those.
Yeah.
I also picked up an Ed McBain novel from 1960 called See Them Die. It's the 13th book of the 87th Precinct series. Now, in this one, a street gang leader in the 87th Precinct named Pepe Miranda has made himself a local folk hero among the low-life criminals of the city. Anyway, the cops of the 87th have a warrant for his arrest, and they organize a fugitive manhunt in the city looking for Pepe. It looks fantastic. All these early Ed McBain novels are great. Again, this one is called See Them Die by Ed McBain. Finally, Eric, I got you a gift.
I knew this was coming because every time you go shopping on the road, I get something, and I'm so excited.
This one
I haven't
is
gotten
huge.
a gift in a long time.
It is a big one. You may need a dolly to take it to your car.
Oh, my God. What is that?
Okay, hang in there. I'm going to hand this across to you. No, I'm not kidding at all. Like, be careful. Do not drop this on your laptop or your head, or you're going to get your skull crushed.
You know what? You know what don't work out. What in the world is this?
Yeah, I know you have back issues, so be careful lifting it.
Good God, it's huge.
Tell them what I handed to you.
It simply says 20th Century Crime and Mystery Writers.
Right. 1,500 pages. It was published in 1980 and 1985. It's a reference book. Consider it like an encyclopedia of crime fiction authors.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I see this.
It has amazing information. It's probably the most thorough book for research that I've ever had. There's 100 contributors who actually made this book happen. It has biographies of every author, pseudonyms, bibliography. It lists all the short stories that every one of these authors wrote. It is the ultimate referenceability. It has a very wide variety of authors. Like Don Pendleton has an entry in there. The Modesty Blaze creator, Peter O'Donnell. All the pulp guys are in there. It's great.
Yeah, look at this. Like I just looked up David Francis Dodge. I mean, it's got where he was born, his military service, who he's married to, his kids, and then it's got a list of his novels, years, publishers. Like you said, short stories, all the publications that he's had. That's amazing.
In fact, the one you have, I believe, is decommissioned library book from the Chicago Public Libraries. I have the second edition from 1985 here. So, but if you're ever looking to do research for anything, man, that is a good place to start because it has everything in it, and it seems to be super accurate. And the people who put it together, I mean, what a Herculean effort it would have been to put this thing together. I mean, it is the ultimate reference book.
Well, God bless you.
Well, sure. We'll enjoy.
Thank you.
The last thing I should mention before the feature is that by the time this episode airs, or shortly thereafter, the second issue of Men's Adventure Quarterly should be available from Amazon. I haven't actually seen it myself, but I got a sneak preview of the table of contents in PDFs. It is their spy fiction issue filled with Cold War espionage stories originally from the Men's Adventure magazines of the 1950s and 1960s. Many of these stories have not even seen the light of day for 70 years. Our buddy Bob Dice pulled it together, and the graphic design is done by Bill Cunningham, so you know it's going to look awesome. He's actually, in my mind, the best magazine graphic designer in America, hands down. And he always honors that old pulp art tradition when he puts a publication together. Best of all, there in the Men's Adventure Quarterly, issue number 2, there is a 1,000-word introduction, that issue, by me. And Eric, that is why I'm a multimillionaire now. Anyway, you need to check out Men's Adventure Quarterly, issue number 2, on Amazon. It should be coming out soon. It's really custom made for guys like us. I also checked with Bob, and women are allowed to buy it as well, even though it's called Men's Adventure Quarterly.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Amazon said it's okay. They checked with Jeff Bezos. It's like me buying secret antiperspirant. It's totally cool. They're not even allowed to ask who it's for when you buy it.
Alrighty then.
All right, so my jokes are falling flat today.
Yeah.
Let's go to our feature. I want to learn about this Fleischman guy.
Today's feature is on an author that I've really, really enjoyed over the last, over the last year or so. Like a lot of crime noir authors, his name is kind of complex. He was born Avron Zalman Fleischman on March 16th, 1920. His parents were originally from the Ukraine, and later he used the name Albert Sidney Fleischman. When writing, he's mostly known as A.S. Fleischman, or just simply Sid Fleischman. And I'll just call him Sid for all the purposes we have here.
First name basis.
Yeah, why not? So when Sid was 2, the Fleischmans moved from Brooklyn, New York to San Diego, California. In the 5th grade, Sid decided he wanted to become a magician. After high school, he traveled the country performing magic on a ghost and goblin traveling show. Now, Sid joined the U.S. Navy Reserve, and he served aboard the USS Albert Harris during World War II. After the war, Sid graduated from San Diego State with a Bachelor of Arts degree, and then he went on to write 5 nonfiction books about magic from 1939 to 1947. And this would forecast a long writing career where this guy wrote magic tutorials and children's novels. But crime noir was the next big step that Sid was going to take. So Sid began writing for the San Diego Daily Journal, but when it went out of business, he turned to fiction. Due to his Navy life in Southeast Asia and his newspaper reporting on crime, he decided to blend those two experiences together, and he enjoyed a 15-year run as a successful crime noir and action-adventure author. His first crime noir novel, The Straw Donkey Case, was published in 1948 by Phoenix Press, and it was a digest-sized paperback. I actually have a copy, which I'm surprised to find in my collection. It looks like a little magazine.
Yeah, I looked at. I didn't like the cover.
No,
I
it's
found the
an
cover
awful cover.
kind of disturbing, actually.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. But I read and reviewed it, and I mostly liked it. It's about a private eye named Max Brindle who accepts a really bizarre case when this wealthy man named Ranson walks into his office one day. Ranson feels that one of his family members is wanting to murder him, and he thinks that they're wanting an early inheritance. So Max mostly just dismisses this and tells Ranson he's being paranoid, but Ranson produces a large amount of cash and asks that Max join Ranson and his family for dinner. After dinner, Max tells Ranson to just simply change the will to no inheritance money if he's going to die by unnatural causes. Sounds simple enough. So Ranson changes the will, and the very next day, Ranson's body washes up on the beach. And I'm not going to ruin the plot for you, but it has some really cool twists and turns that were just really, really good. Max is caught up in the murder mystery while also dealing with 2 beautiful broads. And I would imagine the folks at Fawcett Gold Medal loved it. In 1949, Phoenix also published the author's murder mystery novel, Murders No Accident, in hardcover. The author's 3rd work of fiction, Shanghai Flame, was the first of his books to be published by Fawcett Gold Medal. It was also the first of his crime noir books that's set in Southeast Asia, a common trend that would often be the backdrop for Fleischman's storytelling. According to Google Books, Shanghai Flame has a man named Alex Cloud searching for a woman named Flame. Apparently he must locate her, bring her back to a ship so he can leave Shanghai alive. Now, Starkhouse Press reprinted this book in 2016 as a double with his 1954 ace novel, Counter Spy Express. Sid saw his novels Look Behind You, Lady and Danger in Paradise, published by Fawcett in 1952 and 1953. In 1954, his novel Malay Woman was published again by Fawcett Gold Medal. Tom, I borrowed your tattered old paperback copy of this book, and man, I really liked it. The book begins in a Singapore airport and introduces a fugitive named Jock Hamilton. Now, Jock is wanted for allegedly killing his wife. He's innocent, but his friends and allies have kind of started to disown him. So Jock is hoping to catch a flight to Melbourne, Australia, to sort of escape the pressures of his life and law enforcement. But things really don't go according to the plan, and Jock is forced to flee the airport and eventually he catches a steamship headed to Malaysia. The book's second half has Jock meeting this wealthy woman named Kay on the ship, and he overhears two hired killers talking about murdering the woman, so he does the right thing and he warns her. Eventually the ship docks and Jock returns to his friend's rubber plantation, a place where he was employed for a long period of time. It's here that he's seduced by his friend's wife, where he also discovers that Kay is a nearby neighbor. Now, this isn't a romantic fling like I'm making it out to be, but the book has action and adventure and a central plot that I'm not going to ruin for you, but it all ties in really nicely, and Sid loads the book with suspense and intrigue. You can read my full review of the book on the blog. If you want to read it, Starkhouse also reprinted this one as a double with Danger in Paradise. Sid's most well-known book is 1955's Blood Alley. It was also published by Fawcett. It's about an American merchant captain named Tom Wilder that finds himself imprisoned by the Chinese communists when they seize his ship. The novel was spotted by William Wellman, who was an immensely popular director at the time, who also won an Academy Award for A Star is Born. He convinced Sid to help him adapt Blood Alley to film. Sid decides to move to Santa Monica, California to collaborate on the film, and he remained there for the rest of his life. The film starred John Wayne and Lauren Bacall. Those are two heavy hitters.
Yeah, for real.
And released in 1955. Now, because of the success, Wellman had Sid collaborate with him on a number of films, and also that launched Sid into the movie-making business.
And probably kept him away from novels and cost us a lot more books.
Right, exactly.
He probably would have written a lot more had he not
probably would
been
have.
seduced by the siren song of Hollywood.
Well, he went on to work with guys like Kirk Douglas, and he also adapted a 1960 Western called Yellow Leg into the film The Deadly Companions. It was Sid's only Western novel, and I read and enjoyed it. It sort of reminded me of Arnold Hano's classic Western, The Last Notch, where most of the story is more of like a psychological one. In Yellow Leg, a former Union serviceman has spent the last 8 years trying to find the man who scalped him during the American Civil War. And the book has this really thick, wrenching atmosphere that just had so much to say about the human spirit. The book was published as both Yellow Leg and The Deadly Companions, and, I sound like a broken record, but it was reprinted by Starkhouse as a double with a novel called The Sun Worshippers. Now, Sid's last crime noir, or at least adult fiction novel, was The Venetian Blonde.
I love that title.
Yeah, it's great. And it was released in 1963. I read that one, and man, I just loved it. It was my first introduction to Sid's writing, and it was just so sexy and witty, and it was just unusual. The book stars a former card sharp named Skelly, who's on the run from a provocative gambler named Brack. Now, Skelly flees to Venice Beach, California, where he teams up with a woman named Evangeline to run the perfect con. You see, Evangeline is a fake psychic, or medium, and the two of them decide to run this con game on a really wealthy old woman who wants to talk to her dead nephew.
I like that setup.
It's awesome. And the idea is that they will keep taking her money and pretending like she's talking to her dead nephew during seances. But things get really escalated when they pitch to the old woman that they can bring her nephew back to life for $1 million. So the grieving old woman accepts the deal, but how are they going to bring the dead back to life? Surprisingly, this isn't a supernatural novel, but it's a really awesome, carefully crafted crime noir, and what I thought was probably the perfect finale to Sid's crime fiction career.
Was it played for laughs, or was it kind of like dark and foreboding, or like?
It was funny. It had some funny stuff, but as it got towards the end, it started getting pretty serious.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, it was great.
That does sound great.
Yeah, again, it was reprinted by Starkhouse as a double with Look Behind You, Lady. But after 1963, Sid concentrated all of his writing efforts on children's books or the nonfiction books about magic. Through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, Sid authored nearly 50 children's books, including the Newbery Medal award-winning Whipping Boy in 1986. That book was turned into a play in Seattle called Prince, Brat, and the Whipping Boy. I think that Newbery Medal is a pretty big deal.
It is. No, it's like the Pulitzer Prize for your children's literature.
He also authored 4 nonfiction books on people, including Houdini, Charlie Chaplin, Mark Twain, and he wrote his own autobiography, which is called The Abracadabra Kid, A Writer's Life, and it was published in 1996. He also wrote a movie novelization for the Disney film The Adventures of Bullwhip Griffin, which in essence was based on his children's book by the Great Horn Spoon. Sid and his wife Betty had 3 children. His son Paul, who also enjoys a successful writing career in the world of children's books, and he also won the Newbery Medal. A.S. Fleischman, or Sid to his friends, died on March 17th, 2010, one day after his 90th birthday.
It's good to see one of these guys living past 55. I get so bummed out when I see the number of these guys who died in their 50s.
Yeah, the disappointing thing, like you alluded to earlier, is just that he didn't write more crime noir.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of these guys who, I think once you get established as a children's book author, let's call it what it is. It's easier to crank out a children's book than it is a Fawcett Gold Medal crime novel.
Yeah.
And if it's selling more, guys got to eat, right?
Yeah, so... But anyway, for this feature, I used information culled from Starkhouse Press's website, Wikipedia, James Reasoner's Rough Edges blog, and IMDb. And heck, Tom, these days I even use our own blog for a lot of research, simply because we've covered so many books and authors.
I do that too.
Yeah, so why not
But
go?
this week I picked up 3 different books to read that I realized we had already reviewed, so it was a close call.
Go figure. But why don't you go ahead with your review?
Okay, good. I'm going to review a book called The Long Tattoo by Eric Corder, Corder. Now, during the 1960s, Gerald Mundis used the pseudonym Eric Corder to write 5 historical fiction novels about the American slave trade and its aftermath. While the books do have a chronological continuity with a few recurring characters, I actually reached out for the author, Mr. Mundis, and he told me they can be read in any order as standalone novels. The Long Tattoo is his 1968 paperback, and it's about a black regiment fighting in the American Civil War. It's available today under Mundis's own name, and they packaged it as a series, but the original books were never packaged as a series whatsoever. He just, for marketing purposes, I guess he decided to package them as a series for the reprints. But the original paperback with like salacious cover and all that, they stand on their own.
Yeah.
So the main character, at least at the beginning, is a guy named Labe, L-A-B-E. He's like the simple and good-hearted slave working as a blacksmith on the Crawford plantation. One day, 3 men from the pro-slavery Confederate States of America visit the plantation asking Mr. Crawford to donate some blacks to help support the fight against the anti-slavery Yankees. Labe is volunteered for the job by his owner, boss, whatever, and at the next daybreak, he's off with the rebels. So these conscripted men meet up with others who were in the same boat, and they're marched up to South Carolina under the crack of whips to construct a Confederate fort. Now, rumors start spreading among the men that if they defect to the north, to the Yankee side, they're going to be set free from the bonds of slavery. It's also in South Carolina that Ray first encounters a group of dudes known as Bryerson's Butchers, an Alabama unit of just straight-up killers and psychopaths who have no patience for either Yankees or black people. Acts of cruelty and humiliation targeting the slaves abound at the South Carolina fort. Meanwhile, word comes back from the soldiers on the front line that the Union was not just freeing blacks, but arming them and encouraging them to join the fight against the Confederates. As such, it's really no surprise at all, I'm not ruining anything, when Labe slips away from his new masters and defects to the federal side of the war. So Labe falls into a company comprised of escaped slaves. The training sequences that transformed Labe from an undisciplined slave into a soldier and marksman were just fantastic. It's like one of those training sequences you could almost it would be just perfect in a movie. The narrative lens eventually widens to give the reader a look at the tactical decisions being made as Union troops roll through the South. It takes a while to get there, but the combat scenes starring Labe's unit are really vivid and exciting. I would have liked them to emulate the brutality of an edge Western, but they were mostly satisfying, particularly as they lead to this reckoning between Labe's guys and these terrifying Bryerson's Butchers from earlier in the novel. Overall, I thought The Long Tattoo was a good book, but it wasn't amazing. It was if you enjoy combat paperbacks, especially ones set in the Civil War, you'd like this. The evolution of Labe from slave to soldier was really well told, and the fictionalization of Civil War battles, seemed realistic enough to me. I'm certainly no student of the Civil War. The paperback was more historical fiction than pulp fiction, but definitely worth reading if the plot concept appeals to you. Again, the book is called The Long Tattoo. The original vintage paperback is under the name Eric Corder. The reprint is under the author's real name, Gerald, Jerrold Mundis, Mundis.
Does this hero Labe, is he in the other books as well?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Nope. There is a character who is in the next book.
Okay. All right.
Which
Fair
I
enough.
guess takes place during Reconstruction or something.
Fair enough. Will you read another book in the series?
Probably not.
Or,
I like, honestly, it was good, but I don't really gravitate toward historical fiction that makes me smarter. I want my historical fiction to make me dumber.
Okay.
And it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't as, I want my pulp fiction to be more pulpy and kind of over the top with like heads exploding and stuff like that. This felt like I was reading a book, a Civil War historical novel, which is not something I necessarily gravitate to.
Yeah.
I wanted something more pulpy.
Okay.
But he's a good writer and nice guy. I mean, hell, he responded to me. There's certainly no reason to be nice to me.
Right. Yeah,
So,
fair enough.
Yeah.
All right.
What are you doing?
All right, so today I'm going to review the debut novel in the Mountain Majesty series. This was a series of westerns that was published by Bantam between 1992 and 1995. Honestly, what really attracted me to this series is the beautiful cover artwork by artist Tom Hall. Otherwise, there are just so many of these 1990s Mountain Man-style western series that I just can't keep up. There was the last Mountain Man series, there's Wagons West, there's Wilderness, and other stuff like Cheyenne and so forth that had some of the same elements. Mostly the idea with the Mountain Man westerns is that it's set prior to the mid-1800s, with a lot of the American West still wild and unsettled. Also, this type of western storytelling replaces repeating rifles and six guns with things like tomahawks and flintlocks. I guess you could call it pioneer fiction. Cowboy hats are replaced with animal skins, and these books capture the essence of the true American frontiersman, so I sort of gravitate to those kind of books anyway. But Mountain Majesty was authored under the name John Killdeer, but this was really a house name shared by both Ardath Mahar and David Robbins. We talked about Mahar a few weeks ago. She was a Western, fantasy, and science fiction writer, so she authored the first 6 books in the series, and then David Robbins did the last 2. Robbins, of course, is the author of the successful Wilderness series, as well as Endworld and the spin-off series from Endworld. I can't remember what it's called. But the book centers around 2 protagonists who are culturally different. One is Cleve Bennett, a young man who runs away from home after being brutally whipped by his abusive father. His mother attempts to intervene, but Bennett's father turns his rage on her. On the defense, Bennett ends up assaulting his father and makes a really wise choice to just leave his family and head into the majestic Northwest Territories to learn trapping and become a man. The second series character is a Cheyenne woman named Second Son. After besting most of the male warriors in physical combat, Second Son achieves a level of respect that makes her a man within the tribe. She spends most of the narrative hunting, trapping, and eventually fighting with the despicable French trapper named Henry Lavalette. He's sort of the book's villain. These 1990s pioneer sagas typically showcase the same genre tropes, and this one's really no different. Readers are thrust into the Cheyenne customs and traditions when young Bennett is incorporated into the tribe through all the various physical trials. It's the proverbial fish-out-of-water element that sort of captivates the story. While there isn't a lot of action, the tribe does face the trapper and consistently feuds with the Blackfoot tribe. I think if you enjoy the early entries in the last Mountain Man series by Johnstone, or if you like the Sackett's novels that focus on the 1700s period of time, or I should say the 1500s period of time, in Wagons West, then you'll certainly enjoy this as well. From a writing perspective, I think the delivery and plot could have used some spark. But anyway, I think it was a solid read. And again, this is Mountain Majesty series. This was the first book called Wild Country. Yeah.
Written under the pseudonym John Killdeer.
Yes.
Right, but it was actually written by Ardath Mahar.
Right, yep.
And Ardath Mahar is a woman.
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
question.
Mm-hmm.
Only because I'm maybe a little bit sexist and I don't read a lot of women's books. Were there any tells whatsoever that this book was written by a woman? Had you not known and you thought that John Killdeer was a real dude, would you have suspected that this book was written by a woman because of anything in the book?
Yeah, definitely, because the main character is the Cheyenne warrior who is referred to as a man.
No, I don't understand what you're saying. Could you tell that this book was written by a woman?
Yeah, I could tell that was written by a woman because she's literally creating a character that is out. She's basically outclassing all the male warriors of her tribe. She's called Second Son,
right?
And everyone refers to her in the book as another warrior of the tribe. Now, back then, obviously, the women didn't fight, they didn't hunt, they didn't.
Right, so it's like a Mulan type of thing, where the female main character fights as good or better than the dudes.
Yeah, think about her as Wonder Woman. I mean, she basically she outclassed everyone. And
got it. So the strong female protagonist might have might have set your radar off that this was written by a woman.
I would say, yeah, definitely based on that. Yeah, I would have thought so.
Got it. I'm following.
Yeah.
Okay, so this concludes episode 87 of the Paperback Warrior podcast. Join us next Monday morning for another new episode, and then join us every day at paperbackwarrior.com for new reviews of vintage books. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and all the paperback dating sites. Review us on iTunes. Donate on PayPal. Don't take any wooden nickels. A stitch in time saves 9. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. We will catch you next time. Be cool.
Bye.